raised their dividends compared to 91 in the fourth quarter of 2020. Just two companies reduced or halted their dividends during this year's first quarter. Dividends underperform amid cuts. Many United States companies cut or suspended their dividends during the first quarter of 2020 to preserve capital, including Ford, Boeing, Marriott International, and many others. As a result, dividend stocks have underperformed the broader markets. Last year, from March through the end of August, the MSCI World Index returned 55% in United States dollars. The MSCI High Dividend Yield Index returned 37% during the same period, but that disparity has been narrowing recently. Are more dividend raises in store? So far, dividend increases aren't huge when compared to a year ago. Of the S&P 500 companies that raised their dividends in the first quarter, they did so by 11.1%. That compares to 9% in the same period a year ago. As COVID-19 vaccine rollout efforts progress and the economy reopens, companies will likely be more willing to return capital to their shareholders. Some analysts expect to see a 5% increase in payouts on a per-share basis compared to 2020 levels. The past year has been difficult for companies and dividend investors, but now glimmers of hope are starting to appear. GameStop announced yesterday that Ryan Cohen, the co-founder of Chewy, will become chairman of the video game retailer next month. Cohen is also a manager at RC Ventures, the activist investment firm which invested in GameStop last year. The firm wants GameStop to focus on e-commerce and close physical stores, which haven't been profitable. Box, a cloud services provider, raised $500 million in an investment round led by private equity firm KKR & Company. Box will use most of the proceeds for a stock buyback. Twitter held talks with Clubhouse, the popular social audio app, about acquiring it for roughly $4 billion. However, discussions between the two companies stalled, and Twitter launched a computing service called Spaces. Clubhouse is now looking to raise capital at a valuation of $4 billion. Apple is delaying production of MacBooks and iPads as it contends with supply shortages. MacBook production is being hampered by a lack of chips used in the product circuit board, while iPad production is being delayed due to display component supply chain issues. Costco wholesale posted better than expected sales data for March. The warehouse discount retailer said net sales for the 5 weeks ended April 4th increased by 17.6% year over year. Same-store sales were up 16% and e-commerce revenue jumped 57.7%. And that's it for the SoFi Daily. Stay tuned for Ars Technical.
And went back and got his wife family, and they began to collect all the important documents of the American government they could, the Congress working together, trying to grab all the legislation, somebody felt to grab the Constitution, and here they go. They took off. The British were so close on their heels that the British officers that ruled the British Army actually ate dinner in the White House. And they ate the meal that they took.
Isn't it the crazy stuff?
Madison and his family. So that's how close they were.
I watching those.
Madison was going out the back door, the dinner in the front door, and
it's like mountain climbers.
Dinner basically, and
but they don't have the rope.
Meal. They decided
and
they knew they couldn't hold.
First, they have ropes.
They didn't have train. Again,
and try how to. They
and
they
jump
they
couldn't hold
on the side.
Not really sure whether they even wanted
catch
to.
something.
And
I saw a guy that did with the rope, and he couldn't do it.
Montreal and Toronto, where they've gone in and burned government
and then he did it without
towns during their victories. So they took all the furniture.
And then I saw in this documentary that so many climbers
they were
known
burn the White House down.
Like from National Geographic,
and there was no capital at this time. That was kind of the center of government. They just decided
That's crazy, but it's still in a way crazy that people, they're like, they could do anything to just get this space. But oops, I slipped and then
river a little bit in the Chesapeake Bay. They were going to attack Boston or Baltimore. I'm sorry. And
Yeah, I
as they
think
sailed into
the
Chesapeake Bay,
Sherpas, man,
they encountered a fort that
they don't
became
have a
very
lot of
famous in the history
options
of
to make
our
money and stuff, so
history
they're
here
the
in
ones
our
doing all the
country.
heavy lifting
They
because
came to
people
Fort
that
McHenry,
get the credit for
which
climbing
overlooked the Chesapeake Bay,
Everest, like
protects the
even the first
Sea of
British guy that
Baltimore,
got it to
and
credit
the
for being
warships
the first
sailed in
one to
there. The
reach the
ultimatum
summit,
was given that they were
led
going
by
to
a
attack the
team of
fort. The
Sherpas.
fort had so much
Well, he
time
was
to
the first one helping
evacuate,
the Sherpas
and
out of the way.
then would fall in the
Plus, they're
British
doing all the
hands.
hard work. They're
And of
carrying
course,
all the
the
gear
southern
underneath the
Americans
pad. They're
have
doing,
in favor of being
everything.
bullheaded.
And these guys do it
You know,
over and over
sometimes
and over
not too much
again
of it, we're
until
bullheaded. And the
something
Americans
kills them.
decided this is the place they were going to stand off the
And I'm
British
just thinking, like,
Navy.
I don't know what they're being
And
paid, but they
they
can't
held on
possibly
there.
be
You
paid
remember
being
how
paid enough.
the
You know what I
war
mean?
took place all night.
I'd
There
be
was a
like,
lawyer,
if I did
and
that,
his
I'd be
name
like, all
was
right, you get me
Key.
to the top and you get
And
me back
Key had
alive,
been
I'll take you
dispatched
back
by
to America
Madison
with me.
to
Set you
the
up
head
with a
of the
good
British
job. You know?
Navy in order to secure a prisoner
Yeah, I
exchange. You
mean,
remember the war had been going on for 2 or 3
there's a lot of
years
things that I
here.
react on sometimes
Prisoners
when
had
I'm
been
watching
taken by
people.
both
Like,
sides,
it's not only those
and really
climbers,
prisoners of
I don't know
war
if you meant, I don't know if you heard,
not
Rory,
all
but
that
those
conducive to
that
winning
do
the
this
war. The more the burden. So you've got to feed all
this
your prisoners of
free
war.
jump,
You've got to
free,
take care of
I don't
them.
know what it's called in
They become
English.
a burden.
It's
So
another way in
Madison had
English.
approached the British
And
government and
you can
directed
see
the
them
commander of the British Navy
doing the
about that
most
exchange of prisoners.
sickest,
Key had gone
thing.
overseas
You
that
know,
prisoner
sometimes you can
exchange.
see
He had
them
gone
getting
down into
chased
the
with
brig
the
of some
chased
of those men
and
of war and seen
it's
there
like
the really
the
the
shopping mall
emaciated
or
bodies of
security
American
guards
seamen and
and the
soldiers that
police
had
are
been
like
captured.
trying to
And
hunt them, and they're
he
like
wrote about it later
shoot,
on
shoot,
and
shoot,
talked
shoot,
about
jump here,
the terrible
sliding down
conditions
there,
that these individuals had
jumping
been
in
kept
there,
under.
you know,
Most of them
and
died
sometimes you're
with
like
some
wondering,
diseases and
wow, this was
whatnot.
a close
And
call
he
there,
went
you
down
know.
and began to explain to them that he had come to set them
That's some
free.
crazy stuff, you know.
I think it was
But
David
I mean,
Wheaton
that's
had
their
the
own
story
fault, in my
along those
opinion. In
lines.
that sense,
And
I
as
think
he began
in
to
an
talk
accident
about
like that,
how Key had gone to negotiate
it's
for the
their own
release of
fault,
these
you know.
prisoners, the British
Because
government had stated they would allow those prisoners to go
sometimes
and transfer their own prisoners with one
things
condition,
can get
that the
wet,
prisoners were to be taken
even
home
though
back
it's
to
not
their
wet.
farms, back to their families.
It
The
doesn't
war was
necessarily need
over
to have
for them.
rain, you know.
And
There's
as Key
certain
went down
heights,
into the
it can
hold and began to
wind and
relate
other
that
stuff
message to these
can make,
prisoners,
get
they
other
told
type
Key
of.
this. They said, if we cannot fight
I forgot what it's
anymore,
called in English,
we
but
don't want to go
it
home.
could get wet. It can be bird,
They
poop
said,
there,
we
you
are
know what I
here
mean,
to
or
fight for our
peed, not
country.
peed,
We're
but you know
here
what
to
I mean.
defend our
And it
country.
can be
And if
slippery.
you can get our release, that's
So
well and good.
yeah.
But if that release
Sometimes those
comes only at
pranks.
a promise that we will not fight anymore,
Wasn't this
then
guy
let
who
us stay here.
made the pranks in the
And
States,
so,
like the
as
dumb
Key
prank, he
was
played
on
like the
that
Arab, he got
ship
killed by the
trying to
police or
secure
something,
that
by
release, he
somebody,
began to
because
notice
he
the other
pranked the
men of
wrong
war
guy
began
or
to
something.
sail into the harbor there, and before
Yeah,
long
we
it was
used to
just
call that
British
death by
everywhere,
misadventure.
and they began to
Meaning,
bombard Fort
you were
McHenry.
doing something that was
And
inherently dangerous.
as
Nobody's
McHenry
at
was
fault. You did
bombarded
it to
throughout the
yourself,
night, Key stood
just,
there on the deck of that
misadventure.
ship and watched that
I
bombardment.
saw,
Of course,
check out
that
something
gave
on
birth
YouTube.
to the
It says
national
something
anthem of the
like,
United States of America. And
YouTube
he
was
talked
shot
about in
and
the
killed
morning,
after robbery
what so
prank
proudly
gone
we
wrong.
hailed at the dawn's,
PNP
the
parking
flag
are
was
both on
still
scene.
there.
Wow.
And they had
Can
not
with a
brought
report.
down the flag.
Has
But
Matthew
what
been
had
on today?
happened is there was on a wooden standard
It's 4 minutes
at Fort
past the
McHenry,
hour,
and during the
here's the
bombardment,
headlines
several
from
times during the night, that standard
RSTechnica.com.
had been knocked loose.
Amazon workers in Bessemer have voted not to form a union. The unionization vote had huge stakes for Amazon and the labor movement.
And those men began to get killed trying to hold that
Two
flagstaff
recent
up.
studies sequenced DNA from the earliest Homo sapiens in Eurasia. One study includes DNA from the son of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens' parents.
What became the national anthem of the United States of America. So the War of 1812 did
The
give
United
birth
States
to,
adds
our
Chinese
national anthem. It was a totally
supercomputing
unnecessary
companies
war.
to export
It was not
blacklist.
needed. It was a war that
Biden
needed not have
administration
happened, and
tightens
yet,
controls
it
on
did.
tech
One other
that
thing,
aids
and,
China's
of course,
military.
we used the name William Henry Harrison, who was a general fighting for the United States. Later on, he is going to become
Comcast
a president
nightmare.
of the United
6 6 months without internet despite $5,000 payment. Comcast falsely said service was available, still hasn't delivered 6 months later.
The eastern seaboard, they wanted to take the southern part of the country and basically bottle up the nation.
Windows and Linux devices are under attack by a new crypto mining worm. With the new exploits and capabilities, the SysRV botnet poses a growing
His
threat.
name is William Henry Harrison. And William Henry Harrison hears about the British attempt or design on taking New Orleans.
Rocket report.
He sets out from
SpaceX
Tennessee
abandons
and
catching
makes his way down
fairings.
into Georgia
ULA
and,
bets
Mississippi
on
and Alabama
upper stages.
and fights a battle
All of the
down there in,
resistance that is
Mississippi,
going
and
to be
heads over
gradually
New Orleans, where he links up
disappearing.
with his buddy Jean Lafitte.
I don't know
who
what
was a
any of
French
that
pirate.
means,
The
but
French, remember,
you can
are
read the
war
article and find out.
They think of nothing better than fighting the British, and so they put their forces
DNA
together.
analysis solves curious
they
case
get all
of the
set,
stillborn
British begin to
fetus in the
disembark
bishop's
from the
coffin.
ships. And,
The fetus was probably the grandson of 17th century Swedish Bishop Peter Lundström.
Harrison so prepares his men, and these were ragtag.
United States COVID cases disturbingly high as Michigan sees dire spike. Michigan's increases in cases, hospitalizations, deaths may be bellwether for country.
Some of you guys were in Vietnam, and you know that the Vietnam front.
Apple and Epic Games lay out detailed arguments for upcoming legal battle. Is the App Store its own market or just one of many competing gaming markets?
They stunk. I mean,
I'm going to go ahead and read this article.
And so Harrison took this ragtag bunch of men down there in New Orleans, and when the British finally made a frontal attack,
when I first got
in
up,
30 minutes,
I heard him for a key up,
2,100 British soldiers were killed. That's the greatest loss
I'm going to take
the
off.
British
Be back
ever
after a while.
had. I mean, he just
You know, it's so
literally
interesting
whipped
when
up
I'm
on them. They only
reading
had
it,
like
I'm gonna go ahead and read
6,000
this
troops,
article,
and
and
he
I just
killed
cut
a
off.
third of them in
Who
less than
is
30
doing
minutes.
that? It's not me.
And as a matter of fact, when the British finally turned to run,
Apple Epic
they
Games
came
lay
out
out
of Fort
detailed
Knox
arguments for upcoming
and
legal
won
battle.
what was the greatest victory in
With
American
Epic Games
history.
and Apple set to
To
face
that
off
point,
before a
was the
judge
Battle of
in
New
their
Orleans.
high-profile
Won
trial
that
in just a
battle.
few
And
weeks,
again,
new
it's kind of
court
a strange
filings
thing.
from
The War of
both
1812
companies
is a strange
outline
war.
the evidence and
And the
arguments
strange thing
each
about it
intends
was
to
the
make
day before
in
Harrison
detail.
fought that war, the peace treaty
Unsurprisingly,
had been
each
signed in
document
Europe,
paints a
and the war
radically
actually was
different
over.
picture of Apple's App Store
So he
and its
fought a
role
battle
in the
and won a
gaming and
battle that
technology
needed not
industry.
to have been fought. Remember again,
The
communication is very
disagreement
slow, so we
between the
didn't
two
find out about
companies
that for
escalated
several weeks
publicly
later.
when
But
Epic
Harrison,
attempted
Old
to
Victory,
implement its
now
own
becomes
in-app
president of the
payment
United States.
system in
Two war heroes
Fortnite,
out of that
one of the
war
most popular
become,
games on
president
Apple's
of the
App
United
Store.
States. Very quickly now.
This set into
Let me tell you
motion a
some things
series of
that happened
events
because
that
of War
led
of
to Apple
1812.
removing Fortnite
And
from the App
nobody
Store
was
as
coming in and
Epic ran a
you're
social
I'll
media
apologize to
campaign
you.
around the
This is
hashtag
not biblical studies
Save
in the sense that you
Fortnite,
might be used to. We're teaching
leveraging
the history of the
angry
United States of
gamers
America
against the
because
tech
we have a
giant.
godly heritage. But
Epic
through the
then
War
went
of
to court
1812,
against Apple,
several things
alleging that
happened.
the
Number one,
latter's
the
iOS
United
App
States
Store is a
gamers respect
monopoly,
on the high
and its
seas.
policy that app
With
developers
those few
publishing
ships
to
that we
iOS
had, we
must
had
use
numerous
Apple's own
victories.
payment
How
system,
many of you ever heard
among
of the
other
USS
restrictions in
Constitution?
Apple's review
Old
process,
Ironside.
is
It was during the War of
anti-competitive.
1812 that Old Ironside,
Both Apple and Epic were
distinguished
required to
itself,
file findings of
sent to the
fact and
bottom
conclusions
many,
of law
British
in the
ship
lead up to the
and
trial.
gained some
The
recognition
documents
for
are
the United States
lengthy
on
and
the high
detailed,
seas.
but some
The
key
idea was
arguments are
after the War of
summarized below.
1812, you can't mess with
Apple's
America because they're
argument.
going to fight.
The
And the
top-level
British, again,
gist of
never
Apple's
challenged the
argument,
United
key
States,
aspects of which we
in
already
conquest
covered in
of
some
this
detail
country,
previously,
we
is
gained some
that
respect.
developers
Number two,
have the option
the
to
war
develop and publish
stimulated
games for
American
numerous
industry.
other
War
competing
always does.
devices and platforms,
And,
including
I think,
storefronts
to be
from
honest, I
companies like
couldn't
Sony
say
or
anything definite,
Nintendo
but look
that
at the
enforce
I'm
similar
telling you,
rules
2 or
and
3 of the
fees.
wars this country
Developers
fought
can also
have been
publish
fought
for the
because
web,
of the Communist
where
Society
experiences
of
would still be
Society.
available to iPhone
You
users,
have convinced me of
even
that.
if
That's
developers
why
choose
the war
not to
several
abide by
times
the
just
rules of the
to
App Store published there.
stimulation a little bit. And,
Because Apple is just one of many players in a broader competitive market for video game transactions, and it does not control that entire market, it does not have a monopoly, the company argues. Here's a snippet from Apple's filing. Apple has no monopoly or market power in the relevant product market for game app transactions, and there is no claim that it had any such power when the restrictions at issue were imposed around the launch of the App Store.
claim a nation.
Apple has no obligation to license its intellectual property, and aside from a limited exception not applicable here, businesses are free to choose the parties with whom they will deal, as well as the prices, terms, and conditions of that dealing.
There was not a spirit of nationalism.
Apple says its 30% commission charged to developers who earn over $1 million per year on its Apple Marketplace is an industry standard rate that does not represent an anti-competitive strategy.
And then finally,
the filing contends that a cut like that is reasonable because Apple has spent billions building out and maintaining infrastructure that makes developers' success on the platform possible, from the App Store itself to various APIs and other software development tools. Apple discloses that Epic earned $700 million on the iOS platform in just 2 years of Fortnite being available on iPhones and iPads. Also key to Apple's argument is the assertion that the particular Epic update to Fortnite that led to the game's removal from the App Store was planned months or even years in advance with a specific intent to wage a broad public relations battle to make Apple look bad. If the judge agrees with that interpretation of Epic's actions, that may weaken Epic's case that Apple unfairly removed Fortnite from the App Store after Epic submitted the game for approval in good faith. Epic's argument. The major distinction at play in Epic's own argument is that iOS is an entire market unto itself, and not just one of many competing products in a larger marketplace of video game transactions. If the judge agrees with this classification, Apple may be more likely to be seen as monopolistic. Another key part of Epic's argument involves comparing and contrasting iOS with macOS. Apple claims that its strict rules about what apps can and can't do on the iOS App Store are driven at least in part by concerns about security and privacy for users. Epic points out, however, that Apple claims macOS is secure and private without placing all the same restrictions on the Mac operating system. This is key to Epic's case, that Apple has enforced its rules for the iOS App Store for business reasons, rather than user-centric ones like security or privacy, which could undermine part of Apple's case. Epic asserts that Apple's controversial app review process, quote, does little to keep iOS devices secure, and it alleges that Apple has on multiple occasions screened apps, quote, primarily for non-security issues, including specifically for anti-competitive purposes. Epic singles out Apple's policy that apps must use Apple's own payment system, and thus provide Apple a 15% or 30% cut of the revenue as one that has no security benefits. The filing says there were no widespread or significant security issues regarding payment of the App Store prior to the introduction of that IAP, or the requirement that apps selling subscriptions use IAP rather than alternate payment solutions, nor evidence that IAP is far superior to third-party payment alternatives with respect to security. As a side note, we thought worthy of mention, Epic says in its filing that its own currently PC-based game marketplace will become profitable in 2023. The company has spent considerable money on marketing, user acquisition, and exclusives to grow its install base in the early years, all of which led to expected losses in the first few years of operation. The Rorschach test. The decision of the judge could have far-reaching consequences for not just Apple and Epic, but many other companies that trade in digital software, from platforms to individual developers. Both Apple and Epic themselves have immense stakes in the outcome of this case. If the judge fully embraces Epic's argument, Apple will face an existential threat to a core part of its product development philosophy and business strategy going back many years, and the consequences of a ruling fully in Epic's favor would be far-reaching for the future of Apple. Epic doesn't have quite as much to lose in terms of its status quo position, arguably, but the company has a tremendous amount to gain should it come out ahead. If it defeats Apple on this battlefield, the floodgates may open for Epic to launch its own store on iOS and perhaps, after the precedent is set, on other gaming platforms like those owned by Nintendo, Sony, or Microsoft. The two arguments characterize the nature of Apple's App Store completely differently, and it's clear that the App Store has become something of a Rorschach test for onlookers. There are many dimensions to the case that may end up being critical to the judge's conclusions, like the question of whether Apple's app review process actually provides security or privacy benefits to users, whether Epic pushed the Apple review policy offending Fortnite update in good faith, and wait until May. But the trial may come down primarily to this question. Does Apple's App Store, despite a minority install base in the mobile space, Google's competing Android platform has more than 70% market share, and the presence of numerous strong competitors in the video game industry, constitute its own marketplace over which the company can hold a monopoly? Or is the App Store just one of many digital marketplaces in a vast and healthy competitive games industry on a minority market position platform, with the implication that Apple is not truly limiting developers' access to the marketplace in an anti-competitive way because Apple does not have that kind of power over the larger marketplace? We'll see the arguments move forward when the trial begins on May 3rd in Oakland, California, provided there are no delays. This was written by Samuel Axton, based in Chicago. Samuel is the senior reviews editor at Ars Technica, where he leads the site's gadget and reviews section. He covers Apple and display tech, as well as hardware and software for developers and creative professionals. He has been writing about technology for 15 years and is an AR and game developer for iOS and other platforms.
I do. This is Google Ask Kid. I'm sure we'll start with you, so I'll just keep it 10
Alright, 420, Black Stallion, Ben David, Perez, Shalom, DJ, Freedom, Hurricane, Itzy, JJ, Ralph, Joy Sand, Kyle.
You still want to head out there, you want to be trained?
Not trusted.
Now suddenly,
Paul Woodworker, you crazy old cheesy, silly old Wisconsin cheddar nacho machine. Ed, Chastity,
I just got keep gripped with fears.
Tez, Textus, Joe.
In the name of Her Majesty's fleet, you
God
could
bless.
not, as a gentleman, go back on your commitment and promise.
Y'all are having a good afternoon.
No.
Well,
Mr. Key, I'm not going to go back.
East Coast Standard Time. East Coast Central Standard.
Mr. Key, there's not going to be an America tomorrow. It's all over.
What happened?
What are you talking about? It's all over. Mr. Key, come over here. I want you to look at something. As they stood on the port side of that great ship, he said, "Tell me what you see." I see America. Right over there, that's Fort McHenry. That's my flag. That's my land. That's the nation I represent today. Mr. Key, come over here. Stand to starboard and look out. Tell me what you see out here.
More headlines from Ars Technica. The Apple Watch Series 6 is down to its lowest price yet today.
Right where the water meets the sky. Tell me what you see.
FTC urges courts not to dismiss Facebook antitrust case. FTC blasts anti-competitive actions to neutralize, hinder, or deter competitors. Lenovo's gaming phone has an extreme dual-fan cooling system. Lenovo Legion Phone Dual 2 has 2 fans, 2 USB-C ports, and 6 shoulder buttons. Amazon warns Texas, don't pass bill that would drive up wind power costs. Bill would directly assign grid stability costs to renewable power providers.
To Britain. And should you tonight not lay down
T-Mobile 5G home internet, $60 a month, 100 megabytes per second speeds, and no data cap. 30 million households are eligible. Sign-ups available until capacity runs out.
Fort McHenry from the face of the earth.
Twitch takes additional steps to punish off-Twitch user harassment. New policy will focus on threats of violence, hate groups, and sexual offenses.
There's no armament there, there's nothing there, all they keep there is a lot of clothing.
SpaceX landed a rocket on a boat 5 years ago, and it changed everything.
Nice, sir. Your flag comes down.
Best Buy takes aim at Amazon Prime with its own membership program. The company's new program should appeal to Geek Squad frequent flyers.
If that flag comes down before the sun sets, we'll leave your nation be.
How a virtual private network vulnerability allowed ransomware to disrupt 2 manufacturing plants. Patching in industrial settings is hard. Ransomware shutting down production is harder. How Apple's new app tracking transparency policy works. Paper covers IDFA alternatives, rules for Apple's own apps, and more. Twitter won't let federal archivists post Trump's tweets on Twitter. Twitter is taking a hard-line stance on the banned @RealDonaldTrump account.
Now he watches as the gunmen begin to prepare the cannon. He watches as they bring out the sulfur tanks.
When asked to fix something, we don't even think of removing parts. Across many experiments, participants tried to fix problems by adding stuff.
And he's reminded that no nation on the face of the earth.
Biden admin could set emissions limits so low, gas cars can't meet them. New rules will be written with climate mitigation in mind, new EPA chief said.
And he tells them of what he's saying. Of the word of the
AstraZeneca vaccine linked to rare blood clots. European Union regulators conclude link throws fate of AstraZeneca's vaccine into question and casts dark shadow over Johnson & Johnson's vaccine.
You got to do this for us.
Riders face long waits as Uber and Lyft struggle to recruit drivers. Riders are flooding back to ride-hailing apps. Drivers, not so much.
You may never get out of here.
Dell Alienware launches its first AMD-powered gaming laptop since 2007. OEMs are finally starting to pair Ryzen Mobile with the most powerful GPUs. SpaceX to keep Starlink pricing simple. Exit beta when the network is reliable. We're going to try to keep pricing as simple and transparent as possible. Google is now writing low-level Android code in Rust. Google's promotion of Rust over C and C++ should lead to fewer memory security bugs. Fermilab's latest muon measurements hint at cracks in the standard model. Only a 1 in 40,000 chance that combined results are due to a statistical fluctuation. Microsoft Surface leak. Looks like the Surface Laptop 4 is coming soon. 2021 AMD-powered Microsoft Surface editions are one step closer to reality. Honeywell releases details of its ion trap quantum computer. After its announcement roughly a year ago, we have a paper describing the details. Offsetting is a cop-out. Polestar plans truly carbon-neutral car. The Polestar Zero project will require new ways of building cars, says its CEO.
He realized that that huge ball of fire which was
NVIDIA now lets RTX voice noise cancellation run on GTX global cards. Lower level requirement was quietly updated last September without much notice. Google illegally tracking Android users according to new complaint. Activist alleges use of tracking identifiers without user consent.
Suddenly he realized that he'd never heard 100 cannons in unison before. He heard the orders, he heard the screams of the men as they moved to handle the hot metal of the iron. The old ram started firing. All of a sudden he realized, oh no, there's a mark that gets dead again.
For in 10 minutes he watched. Then he heard some screams.
Mr. King! Mr. King! Do you hear us, Mr. King? What's happening?
And open. But his mouth said anything and he screamed out.
I can't see anything in start. There's so much fire, there's so much noise, I can't see. Listen, Mr. Key, listen. Mr. Key, you wait. When those phosphorus bombs explode, we hear them, you'll see a red glare, Mr. Key, you watch.
Hello? Hello?
And then in a red glare, he saw a flag. Still at the top. All through that night,
And there was a certain man around 30 years of famous about Israel. His name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Jehu, the son of Zoph, and Ephrathite. And he had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went up out of the city daily to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh.
He made his way
And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there.
all of that
And when the
huge amount
time
of
was that Elkanah offered, he gave.
It's 25 minutes past the hour, the first log of today. Minneapolis versus the evidence. Published April 7, 2021 by Ann Coulter. Apparently, no one is watching the trial of Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer on trial for the murder of George Floyd. Otherwise, the media couldn't get away with their spectacular lying to the public about how the prosecution is killing it. It's quite the opposite. In fact, in less than a week, the prosecution's theory of the crime has suddenly shifted from murder to, quote, failed to provide what we would say, in retrospect, would be a full and complete duty of care during the 1 to 3 minute interval between Floyd's resisting the police to his dying, as a hostile crowd screamed obscenities at the police officers, end quote. The defense hasn't even begun to make its case, but the prosecution's witnesses keep helping Chauvin. The only exception to the wild media lying is headline news, where the lawyer commentators go the extra mile by watching the trial. Week 1 was chock-a-block with weeping bystanders wailing about how they felt watching Chauvin restrain Floyd. This would be tremendous evidence if the charge against Officer Chauvin were, quote, first-degree upsetting bystanders. But that's not the charge. That's not even a crime. One especially distraught witness, Charles McWilliam, an elderly black man, testified to seeing, quote, foam coming out of Floyd's mouth. Quiz. Is foam coming out of the mouth a sign of A, a head wound, B, strangulation, C, a drug overdose? Answer, C, a drug overdose.
that our
Apart
flag
from that crucial fact, McMillian's evidence only pertained to, quote, first-degree upsetting bystanders, which, again, is not a crime.
Well-being of a male flying on a bench.
My favorite witness, and the media's favorite too, was Genevieve Hansen, feminist hero. She appeared in court in her firefighter dress uniform in a belligerent mood, though not as belligerent as the day Floyd died, when she showed up in sweats and began shrieking at the officers. The headlines are along the lines of, firefighter, I could have saved Floyd's life, but police wouldn't let me. Yes. Apparently, Genevieve would have invented a time machine, gone back and stopped Floyd from ingesting 3 times the legal dose of fentanyl. I take it back. Chubby girls make the best firefighters. Don't get snippy with me. It's beyond outrageous that fire departments have abandoned all physical fitness requirements solely in order to hire more women. According to Genevieve, the police on the scene unaccountably refused to step aside and take direction from her, despite her full 1 year of experience as a firefighter. Genevieve was totally on top of the situation. In her statement to investigators shortly after the event, she described Floyd as a, quote, small, slim man. Floyd was at least 6'4" and weighed 230 pounds. The largest police officer on the scene was Chauvin, coming in at 5'9" and 140 pounds. Genevieve missed nothing. Even in the calm setting of a courtroom, with no agitated bystanders yelling at her, here are the things Genevieve says she would have done to save Floyd's life in order. I would have requested additional help. I would have wanted someone to call 911. I would have asked someone to run to the gas station and look for an AED, a defibrillator.
The War of 1812 right up to the Civil War.
Why didn't the officers think to call for medical backup? Oh yeah, they already had, twice, starting about 10 minutes before Genevieve even showed up.
As it developed,
I would have checked his airway. I would have been worried about a spinal cord injury. As we know from the autopsy, there was no problem with Floyd's airway or spinal cord. But as long as you bring it up, his body did contain 3 times a lethal dose of fentanyl.
That's not true. That battle really was
I would have checked for a pulse
until the Civil War came
Eureka! Why didn't... Oh, wait, the officers had done this repeatedly, as several bystander witnesses had already confirmed. By now, Floyd was dead. That's when she would have started chest compressions. So Genevieve, the state's star witness on what the cops did wrong, testified that she would have done pretty much everything the officers did. But she would have been a lot bossier about it. As much as Genevieve's 1 year with the fire department made her an expert on what a police officer should begin, when a police officer should begin chest compressions, the Minneapolis Police Department's own experts directly contradicted her this week. These were, again, prosecution witnesses. On Tuesday, Lieutenant Johnny Mercil, the MDP's use of force trainer, and Officer Nicole McKenzie, the MPD's medical support coordinator, testified that it would be appropriate not to provide care to a suspect who had been fighting with officers or in the presence of a hostile crowd. Chauvin had both those circumstances. Trying to do damage control, the prosecutor asked Officer McKenzie to define a, quote, hostile crowd. She said, quote, a growing contingent of people around, if they're yelling, being even verbally abusive to those trying to provide scene security, end quote. Hey, remember those weeping bystanders last week? Their own testimony confirmed that they were, quote, yelling and even being verbally abusive to those trying to provide scene security.
the
Donald Williams, for example, the bouncer and MMA hobbyist, admitted to continuously berating the officers, all of which is on tape, calling Chauvin a, quote, fucking bum, bitch, and a fucking pussy-ass bitch.
The supreme power.
In one of the tapes, Williams threatens Officer Tao Tao, saying, I swear I'll slap the fuck out of both of you.
Between the two branches of government,
and of course, there was the lovely Genevieve screaming.
Obviously was not a good
Hi,
law.
good morning.
Other than that, the judiciary kept its mouth shut. When Marshall came in, Marshall began to determine that laws
and now for the blog of the day from Kunstler.com.
And that's where that phrase comes
Will
from.
America survive Joe Biden?
500 cases that
Clusterfuck Nation, for your reading pleasure, Mondays and Fridays. Support this blog by visiting Jim's Patreon page.
Is not constitutional.
And I do for $1 a month.
Or a bad law, not that it's
if you want to understand moral authority in America, seek no further than the Gothic doings of the Biden family, especially now that the president's degenerate son, Hunter, has been rewarded with a $2 million advance against royalties, i.e. money up front, from Simon & Schuster, and a gala publicity tour of the national news media designed to conceal his criminal culpability in evidence and contained on the laptop from hell that he stupidly abandoned in a Delaware repair shop while lurching through his daily doings on one of countless drug jags he's enjoyed in between rehabs since his dad stepped back into national politics.
As the judiciary expands,
the failure is shared by a national news media that refuses to scrutinize the obvious financial crimes documented on the laptop, the FBI, which sat on the laptop through the months of Trump impeachment, number one, while the computer contained evidence of Hunter's grifting and money laundering directly benefiting the big guy, Joe Biden, at issue in the impeachment, and the Department of Justice, which has been sitting on its hands pretending to conduct an investigation into all of this. The moral darkness of the family is beyond Shakespearean. It ranges from fantastically sordid personal indecencies like Hunter posting drug-fueled selfie sex videos with whores on the Pornhub website to intimations of rude consort with his teenage niece to the admitted fact of him bird-dogging his dead brother's wife, Hallie, and into financial misdeeds that suggest Hunter sold out his country by peddling Joe Biden's favor to agents of the Chinese Communist Party and other foreign nations. This body of unresolved allegations haunts the House of Biden like some stinking dead animals decaying under the Oval Office floorboards that everyone pretends not to notice. Most recently, in a striking instance of in-your-face duplicity, Joe Biden announced his new crusade against gun ownership the same week that credible evidence surfaced that Hunter had obtained a .38 caliber handgun by lying on the application about his drug use well documented in his discharge record from the Navy Reserve for failing a cocaine blood test, as well as his repeat visits to drug rehab clinics. In 2018, it happened that his then paramour, Hallie Biden, fearing for his behavior, took the gun from Hunter's car and tossed it in a dumpster outside a Wilmington food market. Directly afterward, the Secret Service office in Wilmington went to the gun shop, StarQuest Shooters and Survival Supply, to ask for the forms Hunter had filled out and signed to buy the gun, which itself was never recovered. Incidentally, the Secret Service had no security detail assigned to Joe Biden or his family at the time Joe was out of office and not yet a candidate for president. Plus, the Secret Service has no authority to investigate gun records, a duty of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. What was going on with all that? Do you think Attorney General Merrick Garland might be asking around the Department of Justice building? The gross failure of federal authority and abuse of authority in this land is an ongoing process. You can date it back to wherever you like, say to all the confusion and deception around the JFK assassination, or even further, but it had never been so broad, so deep, and so blatant as when Donald Trump became a candidate, and all the resources of the CIA, Department of Justice, and the Federal Bureau of Investigations were marshaled against him in the phony operations that became Russiagate.
They began to throw off their
now,
rulers as
under
well.
Joe Biden, the system is entirely poisoned and corrupt.
As is always, a war between
Hunter is supposedly under investigation by the Department of Justice for tax fraud. Is that all? Are they not curious at all about the imputation of Chinese influence over decision-making in Joe Biden's White House? Apparently, China paid for the influence it now enjoys. Millions of ordinary American citizens have seen the actual record, screen captured from Hunter's laptop, of email correspondence that details the many deals and payments made by Chinese companies run by the Chinese Communist Party to Hunter's various shell corporations, as well as the memos between Hunter and his partners breaking down the payment schedule among Biden family members, including the big guy. Is there not some larger, very large question as to how this Manchurian candidate with failing mental capacities, seemingly run by other figures in the shadows, came to be installed at the head of our government? The United States of America will not survive as a nation unless we seek to find out.
And the term holy should tell you
this blog is sponsored this week by Vaulted, an online mobile web app for investing in allocated and deliverable physical gold. To learn more, visit Kunstler.com/vaulted. I have no affiliation with that.
The papal power in Europe and their sway over the kings and how England basically became separated.
There have been 89 responses to, will America survive Joe Biden?
The fact that they refused to kowtow to the papacy in Rome. And now that Napoleon is
John
gone,
AZ says,
who also was, remember, that
do not even try to equate Donald J. Trump to the slime ball in the White House right now. This is a direct indication of how terrible the people of this country have become and how rotten to the core their government is. Trump may have juggled with some data to try to offset the absolutely criminal hatchet job that was aimed at him by the entire deep state, but he never sold his own country to a foreign power. America first was his credo, not China first like the Biden game. By the way, what is the history of the mob in Wilmington, Delaware? Is there a possibility that the mob is working with the cartels, who are working with the Chinese, who are working with our friendly globalist group? Just asking.
For two people fighting
and take
there by the mailboxes on the Portland Street side.
Their independence. They've taken advantage of us
no weapons
being weakened by Napoleon.
The victim is a white male. He did not have a shirt on. It was torn off.
Raymond R. says, if old John Glove is right, the United States of America will reach its best before date in 2026. That's 1776 plus 250 years. For all its problems, failings, and hypocrisy, America has brought a lot of good into the world, and its passing will be an historical tragedy. You can reference an article at archive.org/details/PDFY-2F_IHS6BLTGJB2AB.
Not knowing who the first five presidents of the United States were.
Check that one out.
All the streets that run perpendicular.
Neurodoc says, look around. The rule of law is dead. The United States dollar is a laughable joke around the world, unknown to America's boobists. The ideal of decency and fairness in one's business with others is dead. America now only consists of several groups that are jealous of and hate each other with zero chance of debate or reconciliation. America is truly dead, flatlined, unretrievable. The only positive outcome at this point is Civil War II, with balkanization of the former U.S. into multiple smaller countries, a la Yugoslavia.
Violated it at will. And, you know, the rest of the nations around the world have been held to upholding it while we don't uphold it ourselves. But Monroe saw what was coming. He heard the word from
Backrow
this
Heckler
alliance,
says,
this holy alliance
thing
in
is,
Europe.
Jim
He saw what
Psaki,
was
Biden's
coming and
mouthpiece,
looming
is in
on the
front of
horizon.
national
He knew
media
that there was
every
going to be
day.
another war, and
Jim raises
something
good
was not
points, and
done
you'd think
to,
at least one of the
nip it in
correspondents
bud,
shouting
so to
questions
speak.
at
Did it
Psaki
while it had
would
before it
bring
had a
some
chance
of
to
this
really
up,
formulate.
but they don't.
And
Instead, it's all
Monroe was
softball
pursuing
inquiries,
an
some of them about
alliance with the
Biden's
King of
dog.
England.
It's almost as
And
if these
that
celeb
alliance
reporters
would
and
have,
big Dem
stood
polls
against
are on the same
Holy
team.
Alliance of Europe. In other words, they wanted to put together some kind of an agreement that said, we're going to stop you. We are not going to allow you to come back into the Americas. We're not going to allow it. And Monroe had a Secretary of State. Losing lights out here. And Monroe's Secretary
Middle
of State
Peninsula says you can search and find many of Hunter Biden's nudie pics out on the internet. I wish I could unsee them. Lots of sexual goings-on in crappy hotel rooms. Yet Cabbage Head Biden thinks Hunter is the smartest person he knows. I guess compared to his mental ability, that may be a true statement. I hope everyone who voted for old Cabbage Head gets what is coming to him. Unfortunately, the rest of us are along for the ride.
The second president of the United States, and basically Monroe took his advice. And Monroe launched out on his own, independently, as the president of an independent
says,
country.
Do you think Attorney General Merrick Garland might be asking around the Department of Justice building? No, I don't. I think Merrick is quietly sitting in his office like a good boy, feet on his desk, maybe a little nap now and then, and waiting for the next slot in the Supreme Court to become available. But he'll have to beat out Stacey Abrams and possibly former President Obama. Poor Merrick, being a spaniel all his life, didn't get him everything he wanted.
The first one was, number one, you stay out. Number two,
well, that's it for the comment section and our news and blogs. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I'll leave the channel open for discussion. Bye.
Stay out of European affairs. And of course, you know, the hypocritical nation that we have become. And I say that with a grain of humility about it. You know, everybody else is expected to obey the rules, and we broke ours basically beginning World War I.
It's going good. How are you doing?
40 times since then. And of course, we used the Monroe Doctrine as early as the war down in Argentina.
I had breakfast.
Trying to keep Europe out of invading
9:44 in the morning.
When the English went down there. We used it again in 61 and 60 when Kennedy went after the missile crisis down there in Cuba. We always cite the Monroe Doctrine when it is to our benefit, and when we decide to go into Europe, it's always under a treaty alliance, you know, NATO or something like that. We're here to help you guys out. But nonetheless, Monroe places the Monroe Doctrine and these kings that make up the Holy Alliance. Basically, I've got listed here France, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. That doesn't sound like too formidable a thing today, but of course, Russia under the Tsars, Prussia would be what we call Germany.
Where are you located?
And Austria was the Österreich Republic under the Habsburgs dominion. The Habsburgs, some of the richest kings that ever ruled in Europe. I mentioned several weeks ago seeing the Spear of Longimanus, which is in Vienna.
It's pretty breezy, a lot of wind.
I've been through there, and I guess Brad and Kit both were. They've got emeralds in there the size of my fist.
Hi, where are you from?
I mean, you know, on the end of goblets and golden scepters. They've got robes that these kings wore that were encrusted with diamonds and rubies.
How far is that from Norfolk?
The thread is gold thread, gold wire. I mean, you talk about some wealth these people had, some wealth. And that's the Habsburgs that ruled.
One of my favorite shows is from there.
Cities, there's what they call a Habsburg gold.
What is your favorite show?
When you look at the cities, some of the houses will be painted a quaint little gold color. It's not a bright gold, it's more of a tan color.
It's an old 50s in the 1950s called the Rifleman.
Rifleman? Monarchies, either a summer
with Chuck
house
Connors,
or summer palace.
they filmed it in Norfolk.
They're all over the European countryside. Colonized, and of course expand their borders. Germany, you kind of feel sorry for Germany after you study their history. Germany's kind of
And are you both ladies